Empowerment is a choice, and that choice often shows up in the oddest of ways. Welcome, card readers. April here on Tarot and Witchery. And this is my March retrospective. This is where I look back on the month and I tell you about my life in tarot. So I started this last month and I kind of want to develop this idea a little bit more. This is where I'm going to talk about the books I read, my life, my reflections, the decks I used, and I'm going to translate it into tarot. And this whole video, I'm going to pepper it with pictures of the farm because the farm is lovely this time of year and I really wanted to be able to share that with you. The theme for March for me was the fives. And it was a profound month. How many of you out there felt like March was deeply stirring, really deeply stirring? It was so stirring for me. In March, I did the Mystical March Journaling Challenge. Thank you to all of you who participated. There were about 50 of you, so that was really fun. If you have been wanting to journal more and maybe you're a little intimidated by it, I wanted to recommend Antoinette's Intuitive Tarot and Jewelry, and I'll put a link to her channel down below. She journals and she shows you her journals, and she's really, I feel like I have to do so much when I sit down and journal, but she really has inspired me that it can be as simple or as complicated as you want, and just watching her videos will really inspire you. So check out her channel. In that challenge, everyone focused on an archetype for the month. And so we either used an oracle deck or we pulled the major arcana out of our tarot and drew one. And for me, mine was number 5, the hierophant. And you know, the hierophant can get a bad rap, I think, sometimes. And I think some of it is because of the traditional Rider-Waite imagery of it, you know, it being the Pope. But I used my deck for the month, because I stuck with this deck all month, was the Cosmic Visions Tarot by Jessica Shackleton. Oh, I love this deck, you guys. I love this deck. And, you know, I want to take a real good look here at the hierophant in this deck. Take a look at this hierophant. It is fabulous. The teacher. The hierophant is the teacher, and it is about finding our teachers, but it is also about understanding ourselves as the teacher and ourselves as a part of the whole from the one that teaches all things. And I think this card is just magnificent at showing that pictorially. So look at the top there, you have the monad or the god eye or whatever it is that you want to call it. And it's connected to the shaman or the teacher, which is directly below. You see that? And there's a real South American sort of feel to this shaman, which I really like. And then below that, you see that he's opening his mouth and he's releasing this light into the student. However, what I love about this, look at these arms, the arms that come out of the eye, or the rays that come out of the eye and go down directly into the student as well. I think this really beautifully touches on something that I feel like, because I feel like the hierophant can become very oversimplified at times, where we're like, oh, it's just about dogma or old systems or old teachings or old ways. And I think like in the shadow side of it, it can. But in the light side of it, it's really about understanding ourselves as the one who's being taught, the teacher, as being every part of this, as a part of the one, the whole, the great I at the top there, and receiving, because we are a part of that God-centered or goddess-centered, one-centered consciousness. And yet we are always feeding others with that and being fed at the same time. This kicked off my month. And it was beautiful because I had sort of this budding idea of myself as a teacher that I wanted to return to. So some of you may not know this about me, but for 10 years, I homeschooled my children and stayed home with them. I was a single stay-home parent, and I stayed home. I had 2 deadbeat dads. And I was an artist. I did glass and steel work. I made garden art. I'll try to put a picture up on the screen. I have a couple pieces left over. But that's how I managed to stay home with my kids. But I also worked at a homeschool resource center as a teacher. I love teaching. I absolutely love it. It's in my blood. My mom was a teacher, an educator. It's something that comes very natural to me. And so I was really looking at this in myself this month, looking at the ways that I allow myself to be taught and the ways that I teach and the ways in which I am hooked up to infinite source. And I knew it was a month of change ahead when I had a cricket show up in early March in my home. I named the cricket Xander. Crickets indicate luck in a lot of cultures, but they also are about the need for change, the need for introspection, the need for choosing the right path. And all through the month, Xander reminded me, change, change, choose, choose. And when we're in the learner's mindset, when we are allowing the universe to speak to us, the tarot, oracle cards, sign symbols, whatever it is for you, whenever we have that learner's mindset, life can become new and exciting. And I needed that because at the beginning of this month, I was really heavy. I was very heavy from the Ukrainian war. I was very upset. I was having days where I would just start crying, periodically throughout the day, thinking about the heaviness of it. And I realized that I really needed to shift my mindset. And this is where the fives, the minor arcana, come in my journey throughout the month. I'd really backed myself into a corner of negative mindset of thinking. And I just was kind of doom and gloom, and I really needed a perspective change. And that's where the Five of Pentacles comes in. A lot of times when we're in these Five of Pentacles moments, we're in a place where we're looking down. We're just so focused on our own suffering, or in this case, I was on the collective suffering. I was focused on that we can come into a real spiral. And I was very, I wouldn't say it was an existential crisis, but it was bad. I mean, I was like, what are we doing? World War III is on the way. There's global warming. Plastics are choking the environment. We're eating toxins. Crude is terrible. The patriarchal spirit is trying to choke the life out of us. I mean, it was a real bummer, you guys. I was on a real downer for sure. It's totally that Five of Pentacles moment where you're so downtrodden that you're not looking up. You're not looking for new solutions. And, the fives are choice points. And they're really about looking at what is and realizing that there can be more. So think about it like this. Cards 1 through 4 in the minor arcana are about the physical lessons that we're learning. Cards 6 through 9 teach us about the spiritual lessons of life on earth. The fives are the bridge that help us make that jump from the physical lessons to the spiritual ones. Finally, the tens are the embodiment of all of the lessons. So 5 is right in the middle, right there where we're at this choice point. And you realize when fives come up in your tarot reading, you've got to realize that you're at a place of personal empowerment. And for me, that's exactly what happened. I really got a mind shift where I realized that I was being very dualistic in my way of thinking, and therefore everything was black and white. And when things become black and white, there's no room for flow in that. It's very rigid. The lines are very hard. And that's this card, when it becomes dogmatic, right? Everything is just so. It can't be any other way than these teachings and these disciplines and the way it is. So there was a real opening up at this point for me in the month. At the same time, the farm was just bursting into bloom. It was lovely. Here is our sand cherry. I wanted to share this with you. Oh my gosh, you guys, I wish you could smell this. This is the most intoxicating smell that we have on the farm. There's no other flower that is like this. It's this sweet, melodious, it just takes you into another place. The air is crisp, and there's just this clean, sweet smell of these flowers. How many of you have sand cherries where you are? Sand cherries, I think they're kind of regaining popularity, but this farm is very old. Our house is 146 years old. And so a lot of these trees are very old. So a sand cherry is kind of a cross between a cherry and a plum. It's got the tartness of a cherry, but it's kind of like a firm plum, and they're like the size of like those large gumballs you used to get out as the machine as a kid. They're super good. Anyway, so we had daffodils that were coming up. And so there was like this, the earth was really crying out to me. There were all these signs and symbols that were saying, grow, become more. You can do this. You can emerge from this place. But there is a struggle, like the seed struggles, that even now there are still many seeds that are below the surface that are struggling to come forward, that there's no signs of life. What's happening is beneath the surface. How many of you feel like you are in that seed phase? And this personal struggle was really highlighted with this book that I read, which was Lady of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. How many of you have read this book? So good. It is the prequel to Mists of Avalon. It is about the sacred recreation of the Lord and Lady and the rites that they go through on the earth, generation after generation after generation, and the incarnation of the Lord and the Lady. What is so lovely about this book, if you have time to read it, is that it really shows how we strive to individuate ourselves here on this planet, and when we learn to relax into who we are, that's where the real magic emerges, and we suddenly find ourselves. And this book again and again is about choice, so it perfectly demonstrates the fives. And at this point, I started to feel renewed in my energies, and so I decided, okay, it's time to clean up some stuff. So how many of you were doing some cleaning stuff out? I was, and I thought it's time for me to redo this space that I have in the house. I sit at the table and I do all my journaling and all my computer work from this space, and behind me are all the books that I like to read and my incense, and then all my crafting stuff. And it was a wreck, you guys. It's really embarrassing. I'm going to show you this, but it's super embarrassing. It was so bad. It was so hectic in there. And like I said, my altar just looked like witchcraft threw up all over it. It was time. I really spent some time making this space very usable. And you can see here that I rearranged all my books, and I brought the books in that I really use. And then I rearranged my crafting stuff so it could be, all of my journaling things could be right here ready on hand. And then here's my altar redone. And this is my 13 moons altar right here. So that felt really good and really refreshing. At this point, it felt so good to be cleaning stuff up that I thought, I really need to get into here. And you can see I haven't done a ton over here yet. But I did my first ever deck declutter, and I'll leave a link for that down below in the description box or at the end of the video if you're interested in watching that. That was really good for me, but it was kind of like a 5 of Cups moment for me to really, both of these, like cleaning out, and I got rid of stuff. I got rid of stuff on my altar. Like, oh my gosh, you guys, I had so much stuff on there. And the 5 of Cups is really about that. It's really about grieving. It's about looking at what you still have and what you don't have, grieving what you don't have anymore, what is passing away, and then moving ahead into what is being offered to you. And you can see that by the 2 cups here. And this whole grieving I had started last month, as I spoke about in my February retrospect, with kind of coming to terms with my mom's death. But then at the beginning of March, my father-in-law was diagnosed with bone cancer. And so my husband was grieving, and that was, and my stepchildren, my bonus children, were grieving that their grandfather was going to be passing. So in many ways, it was, again, about the hierophant, because I could see myself in the position of my husband as the griever, because I had done this 10 years ago with my mom. I had just gone through a lot of cathartic work in February, to be in a place where I was cleaned out. Like, look at that. Look how the universe cleaned me up and got me so that I wasn't a wreck, because I really was a wreck. And so coming into this, I felt like I could be present. I felt like I could be the person who was there. And in this case, the shaman, like the shaman who's already walked the path and can help lead him and be present for him. The shaman also, I think, holds space for the students. I always say, and some of you may disagree with this, let me know, those of you who read tarot, what you think about this idea. I feel like if the magician and the high priestess got together and had a baby, it would be the hierophant. Because I feel like it's the I am and the I know come together and they incarnate, and then they teach that. They teach that wisdom. So that's in many ways, that's the shaman, right? The teacher. And so it was really interesting for at this point in the month for me to realize that I was ready to embody this aspect of the teacher and to offer that to my husband. So again, incredibly empowering, but then I too was looking at the loss of this person. And so the Five of Cups was just perfect for that. And I began to really move forward with looking forward to my 50th birthday, which as I'm recording is 2 days away, April 3rd. And looking at like, what do I want to do? How do I want to move forward? How do I want to move into myself in a new and fresh and exciting way? And that was right here, mid-March here in my my tarot journal here. I wrote, how will I choose to walk this world? Will I embrace this change in my 50s? Will I make the 50s a resonance of authentic power that really sings from a place of focus? And I had felt really foggy in February. And so coming into March and seeing that I was gaining focus, I was just gaining focus coming out of the fog and realizing that focus was available to me. And then having, of course, this moment of what are my 50s going to be like? And of course, I was studying the fives, and the 50s are a bridge point. So it was so synchronistic. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. I was deeply pondering how the first 50 years of my life have been about forging a path, literally bushwhacking. I have never been the person that has taken the regular path. Some of you have been really good at that and have done really well, but I did not. I was homeless as a teen. I was a single parent. I homeschooled. I've always had my own business. The only time I've worked for anybody was maybe like spot jobs here and there, like catering. And then I did have a job with a school district for a while there. But even then I was still doing my art. So I have always just kind of forged my own path, which I'm totally comfortable with. But I was really having this moment of, I don't want to be forging. I want to be relaxing into myself. I want to be relaxing into everything that I've learned. I want to be embodying it. I really want to be moving into that and resting within that space. And so it was perfect right as the confluence of energies were coming together for the equinox. I was so ready for these two energies to merge. And I was thinking about doing it differently. I was thinking about it not being so masculine, so about do. The second half of my life. I'll always be a doer because I love creating. But I wanted it to be more about being. And I do feel like that we are making a collective shift into the more divine feminine consciousness, which is a way of doing or actualizing flows out of being instead of doing. The word doing implies forcing our will onto something in order to wrestle it. So on the equinox, I watched a video, and I want to recommend this. I think everybody should watch this video. It was so good. It was by Tarot Map, and it was her Ostara video. I will link it down below. And she was talking about the paradigm shift from the hero's journey of, overcoming, like coming against in order to vanquish. and how that has been our dominant paradigm. You know, we see that right now with war going on, this dominant paradigm of the hero's journey is about there being a bad guy and a good guy and warring against that and overcoming and being the winner so that there's a loser. And so she did such a beautiful job of talking about this. And it was very inspirational, and it was just dead on with where I was at. And that day was so powerful. Let me know what you guys did for Equinox down below. Let me know what you did for Equinox, because for me, it was a beautiful day where I really enjoyed the neutrality of the day. And there was a point where I felt like it was incredibly resonant with me taking those two merging energies, because it's equal light and equal dark, right? And coming into a place of feeling the playfulness of them, which is the Five of Wands. The Five of Wands is not a serious card. It's probably the lightest of all the fives, actually. And it's that fire energy, which was perfect for starting up Aries season right there on the 20th. And it's about playing with energies. Whenever the Five of Wands shows up, it's not about like, it's not serious. Like, this isn't like, oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end and we're battle royale. This is about learning. It's about trying new things, bouncing things off one another. I was definitely at this place of bouncing energies off. But it's about that confluence. It's like all the energies come together and they mix in the Five of Wands. And then we figure out what is going to be the energy that we move forward with. Because the fives are always a choice point. They're always about a need to be personally empowered, look at things for what they are, and make a decision that works for you moving forward. Fives should draw us into the spiritual plane. And that's where the Temperance card comes in. Temperance is 14, which is 1 plus 4 equals 5. So this is the spiritual aspect of, or the spiritual lesson of the 5, which is making the perfect elixir, you know, mixing and taking away, just adding a little of this and a little of that and seeing it. It's like perfecting a recipe. You perfect a recipe by doing it over and over and over again. What you created, tasting it, and making small adjustments. Not big adjustments, small adjustments. The Temperance card is always about small adjustments. And it's usually about healing, right? So there was a huge amount of healing that I was feeling at this time as I was, you know, moving into the beauty of coming up to my 50s and what that means for me, about letting go of struggle, letting go of strife, resting in my truth, and really enjoying my embodiment. And at this time, I picked up Broth for the Cauldron, which is by Caradwyn Falling Star. Is that right? Oh my gosh, you guys, let me see here. Yes, Caradwyn Falling Star. Such a good book, you guys. So this is her anecdotes, which makes it the perfect book to just like pick up and read like one anecdote, and then you can close it up until you go on to the next story. It's like so good. She's a wonderful writer, really wonderful writer. And it's about the teachers in her life. So this was such a perfect book for me to be reading. It's about the different teachers that have shown up in her life through these different anecdotal stories. And they're very engaging. They're very well written. She's a boomer. So she went through the 60s and the 70s. And, you know, she talks about those transitions, and she's a priestess and does shamanic work. And it's a wonderful reminder to look for our teachers, to look for our hierophants. You know, it's not a one and done. You don't get one teacher and that's it. You might have a teacher for one day and a different teacher the next. You might have a teacher for a season in your life. At this point, you know, this month had really picked up speed. I was continuing to work solely. I worked solely with this one deck this month, other than Judith Orloff's Power of Surrender deck, which I always work with every month, all the time, every week, without fail. This deck, which I will be talking about in my next video. So one of the biggest lessons for the month was around the Five of Swords. You're probably wondering, is she going to get to the Five of Swords? I am right now. The Five of Swords. And the Five of Swords is about pushing against. It really is. It's about mentally pushing against and winning at all costs. There comes a point in our lives where we realize that we have to be willing to do it differently, that it can't be about pushing against. And we probably have several points of this in our life. But for me, approaching my 50th birthday and everything that was going on around me, my daughter got sick. I had to go up there. She went to the ER. I went up for an emergency GI appointment. It's just like, there were so many of you who contacted me with, your life was blowing up. The Ukrainian thing, all of it. It was like, I had to choose in my mind not to set myself against. And I have to choose to make that my default. Because when I decide to set myself against, then I have something to prove and I'm not really standing in my power. And a lot of times when the Five of Swords comes up, we're feeling threatened or we're feeling egoistic and we're trying to maintain something that probably needs to be looked at. It might need to even die or go, And so for me, I really had to decide this month at the beginning of the month to do it differently, to have a different mental attitude about how I was going to proceed with my life. I needed temperance, I needed to do it. I needed to titrate. I needed to make small adjustments to what was going on instead of making big swinging, motions to hack it out of my way or, put myself against that Five of Swords energy there. I didn't want to cut my nose off to spite my face. And that's often what happens when the Five of Swords comes up. So understanding that within myself, within the month, but also looking back over my life at how, I'm an Aries. So head down, eyes closed, boom. Just push it out of the way. I mean, if that's not a Five of Swords lifestyle, because it's like, oh, pick up the pieces later, or don't even bother looking back to see who's splayed out there. Not a good way to be. And I'm not saying I've been like that my whole life, but I can be like that when I feel pushed into a corner or I feel as though I'm suffocating. And for me, I was just like, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. I want to be the person that chooses temperance, that chooses that higher place, that chooses to be the hierophant, to allow myself to be fed by the consciousness of the one, the monad, the whole. I want to be the one that's teachable always, that is allowing my teachers to show up. I want to be soft and supple. I want to be amenable to change so that I can always be growing. Until we meet again, may you always recognize the choice points in your life. May the number 5 moments that pop up spur you on to your internal self, to where you're authentic and your choices lead you into the beauty of who you really are.